My name is Madison Carter, and I'm standing in the marble foyer of the Grand Palladium Hotel in Miami, watching my family's shocked faces as they slowly realize who I am. 8 years ago, they threw me out for bringing shame to our family name. Today, I'm the CEO of a tech empire worth $200 million, and they have no idea until this moment. Let me take you back to where this all began, in the sprawling Carter mansion in Coral Gables, where appearances meant everything, and I was the family's greatest disappointment. Growing up in Miami's elite social circle meant living by unspoken rules that governed everything from how you dressed to who you associated with. Our Mediterranean-style mansion, with its perfectly manicured gardens and infinity pool overlooking Biscayne Bay, was designed to impress, much like everything else in the Carter family's carefully curated life. My mother, Victoria Carter, was Miami society's golden queen. Always impeccably dressed in designer gowns, her platinum blonde hair styled to perfection, she commanded attention at every charity gala and country club event. Her smile was practiced, her connections powerful, and her expectations for her children impossibly high. My father, Robert Carter, built his fortune in luxury real estate development, transforming Miami's skyline with gleaming condominiums that attracted celebrities and billionaires. Success for him wasn't just about money, it was about reputation, influence, and maintaining the Carter family's position at the top of Miami's social hierarchy. Then there were us children, my older brother Marcus and me. The contrast between us couldn't have been starker, and it shaped every moment of our childhood. Marcus was everything our parents had dreamed of in a son. 6 feet tall, with our father's commanding presence and our mother's striking features, he excelled at everything he touched. Star quarterback at his elite private school, accepted to Harvard on both academic and athletic merit, charming enough to win over anyone he met. When Marcus walked into a room, people noticed. Our parents glowed with pride at every achievement, every accolade, every perfect moment he delivered. I, on the other hand, was their constant source of frustration. While Marcus dominated social situations, I preferred the quiet corner of our library, hunched over my laptop learning programming languages. My dark hair refused to hold the elegant styles my mother insisted on. My skin broke out despite expensive dermatologist visits, and my awkward height made me tower over most boys my age in an ungainly way that made photos painful for everyone involved. Family events became exercises in comparison. "Look how Marcus carries himself," my mother would whisper as we prepared for another charity function. "Try to learn from your brother's confidence, Madison. First impressions matter more than anything in our world." My father was less subtle in his disappointment. "Your brother's already networking with Fortune 500 CEOs, he'd announce over dinner while Marcus shared stories from his internship. "What exactly are you planning to do with all that computer nonsense, Madison?" The computer nonsense was actually advanced programming that I taught myself starting at age 13. While Marcus practiced football drills, I created complex algorithms. While he attended social mixers, I built websites and mobile applications that solved real problems. But in the Carter household, technical brilliance was invisible compared to social success. School offered no refuge from the constant comparisons. Palmetto Prep Academy operated on the same principles as our home. Appearance, connections, and conventional achievement trumped everything else. Marcus navigated these waters effortlessly, beloved by teachers and students alike. His girlfriend Ashley was student council president, their relationship the stuff of teen movie perfection. I ate lunch alone in the computer lab, working on projects that fascinated me but earned eye rolls from classmates. My few attempts at social interaction usually ended in embarrassment, like the time I tried to explain blockchain technology to a group of girls who were discussing weekend party plans. Their blank stares and subsequent giggles reminded me why I preferred code to conversation. The one person who understood me was my grandmother, Elena Carter, my father's mother, who lived in a modest apartment in Coconut Grove. Unlike the rest of the family, Grandma Elena valued substance over style. She had immigrated from Cuba with nothing, working her way through night school to become a nurse, and she recognized ambition in forms my parents couldn't see. "Mija," she would tell me during our weekend visits, using the Spanish endearment that connected us to our heritage. Brilliance comes in many forms. Your parents see only one type of success because they've never had to build something from nothing. But you have the mind of an innovator. Those afternoons in her small kitchen, eating her homemade flan while she listened to my latest programming breakthrough, were the only times I felt truly valued. Grandma Elena didn't care that I was awkward at parties or that my clothes came from department stores instead of boutiques. She saw potential where others saw problems. High school intensified the divide between Marcus and me. He was recruited by multiple universities, his acceptance to Harvard celebrated with a party that filled our entire backyard with Miami's social elite. I watched from my bedroom window as hundreds of people toasted my brother's future, their laughter and congratulations floating up through the humid night air. My own achievements went largely unnoticed. When I won the state programming competition, defeating teams from schools across Florida, my parents attended the ceremony but left early for a more important social obligation. When tech companies started reaching out after seeing my portfolio online, offering internship opportunities, my mother dismissed them as those computer people who weren't worth our family's time. The breaking point came during my junior year when I was accepted to MIT with a full scholarship. I had dreamed of this moment for years, imagining finally earning my parents' respect with an achievement they couldn't ignore. MIT's computer science program was ranked #1 in the world, and they were offering me a complete ride based on my demonstrated talent. I prepared for the announcement carefully, printing the acceptance letter on heavy paper, rehearsing what I would say. At dinner that evening, with Marcus home from Harvard for spring break, I placed the letter beside my father's plate. MIT, he read aloud, his expression unimpressed. That's in Boston, isn't it? It's the best computer science program in the country, I explained, my voice trembling with excitement and nerves. They're offering me a full scholarship. Everything paid for. My mother looked up from her salmon, her perfectly penciled eyebrows raised. Boston is so far away, Madison. And, quite frankly, we need to discuss whether this computer phase of yours is really the best use of your time. Phase? I repeated, confused. Mom, this isn't a phase. I've been programming for 4 years. This is what I'm good at. What you're good at, my father interrupted, is irrelevant if it doesn't lead anywhere meaningful. Look at your brother, he's studying business at Harvard, making connections that will last a lifetime. That's how real success works. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat, perhaps sensing the tension building. MIT is actually really prestigious, Dad. Maybe Madison. Marcus, please. My mother cut him off. Madison, sweetie, we need to be realistic about your future. You're not exactly socially gifted. The tech industry is very competitive, very male-dominated. Wouldn't it make more sense to study something more suitable? Maybe communications or hospitality management. Something that plays to different strengths. The words hit like physical blows. Not socially gifted. More suitable. Different strengths. Each phrase was code for the same message. You're not good enough as you are. I don't want to study communications, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I want to study computer science at MIT. They chose me out of thousands of applicants. And that's wonderful, dear, my mother said in the tone she used with particularly slow children. But we have to think practically. What kind of life would you have in that field? Working with computers all day, probably never meeting the right kind of people. Is that really what you want? What I wanted was for them to be proud of me, just once. What I wanted was for my achievement to matter as much as Marcus's football trophies. What I wanted was for someone in my family besides Grandma Elena to recognize that I had value exactly as I was. The right kind of people? I asked, anger finally overriding hurt. What does that even mean? My father set down his fork with deliberate precision. Madison, let's be frank. You've always been the difficult child. Antisocial, obsessed with these computer games. They're not games, I interrupted. I'm building actual applications, solving real problems. Don't raise your voice to your father, my mother snapped. This is exactly what we're talking about. You get emotional, you argue. You don't know how to present yourself properly. Do you really think you're ready for the professional world? The conversation that followed was a masterclass in systematic demolition. Every insecurity I'd ever felt was dragged into the light and examined. My appearance, my social skills, my interests, my potential for success, everything was found wanting. Marcus tried weakly to defend me a few times, but he was no match for our parents' united front. The final blow came from my father, delivered with the casual cruelty of a man accustomed to making hard business decisions. Madison, we're not going to support this MIT fantasy. If you want to waste your time and our money on computer nonsense, you can figure out how to pay for it yourself. We have one child with real potential, and that's where our resources need to go. I stared at him, waiting for my mother to object, for Marcus to speak up, for someone to acknowledge that what he'd just said was monstrous. The silence stretched until it became its own answer. Fine, I said quietly, standing from the table. I'll figure out myself. Don't be dramatic, my mother called as I headed for the stairs. We're trying to help you be realistic about your limitations. That night, I called Grandma Elena and told her everything through tears that wouldn't stop coming. She listened without interrupting, her silence filled with the kind of understanding that meant more than any words could. Mija, she finally said, pack your things. Come stay with me while you figure this out. And Madison? Yes, Grandma. Take the scholarship. Take it and show them what they were too blind to see. 3 days later, I moved out of the Carter mansion with 2 suitcases and my laptop. My parents barely acknowledged my departure, treating it like a teenage tantrum that would soon pass. Marcus hugged me goodbye, whispering apologies I didn't want to hear because they came too late and meant too little. You'll be back, my mother said as I loaded my car. Reality has a way of setting in. I drove away without looking back, heading to Grandma Elena's modest apartment where I would spend the summer working 3 jobs to save money for college expenses the scholarship didn't cover. As I navigated Miami's familiar streets, leaving behind the gated community that had never felt like home, I made myself a promise. I would succeed not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. The woman I would become was already stirring inside me, forged in the fire of their rejection, and strengthened by the love of one person who believed in my potential. I had no idea then just how far that strength would carry me. Boston in September felt like stepping into a different universe. MIT's campus buzzed with an energy I'd never experienced, focused, ambitious, brilliant people who spoke my language. For the first time in my life, being obsessed with technology wasn't weird, it was normal. My dorm room was a tiny single in Burton Connor, barely large enough for a bed and desk, but it felt like a palace compared to the emotional cramped space I'd occupied at home. My roommate situation had fallen through at the last minute, leaving me alone, which suited me perfectly. I could code until 3 a.m. without anyone complaining, survive on ramen and energy drinks, and slowly discover who I was without the constant weight of family expectations. The academic workload was intense, but I thrived under pressure. While other freshmen struggled with the transition from high school to college, I flourished. Programming challenges that made my classmates panic felt like puzzles designed specifically for my mind. My professors began to notice my work, particularly Dr. Sarah Chin, who taught advanced algorithms. Madison, she said after class one October afternoon, have you considered research opportunities? Your approach to optimization problems is quite sophisticated for a first-year student. Research opportunities led to undergraduate projects, which led to recognition within the department. By the end of my freshman year, I was working on neural network applications that graduate students typically handled. The girl who had been dismissed as antisocial in Miami was collaborating with some of the brightest minds in technology. My social life expanded gradually, built around shared interests rather than social hierarchies. Study groups became friend groups. Late-night debugging sessions in the computer lab created bonds stronger than anything I'd experienced in high school. These were people who judged me for my appearance or background. They cared about my ideas, my solutions, my ability to see patterns in code that others missed. During winter break of my sophomore year, I returned to Miami to visit Grandma Elena. My parents had invited me to Christmas dinner, a gesture I interpreted as curiosity about how badly I'd failed at MIT. I accepted, partly to see my grandmother, and partly because some masochistic part of me wanted to test how much their opinions still hurt. The Carter mansion looked exactly the same, but I felt like an alien visiting a planet I'd once inhabited. My parents greeted me with polite smiles and questions clearly designed to uncover evidence of my impending failure. How were my grades? Was I making friends? Had I met any suitable young men? Each question carried the subtext. Are you ready to admit we were right? Marcus, now finishing his senior year at Harvard, seemed genuinely happy to see me. Over dinner, he shared stories about his business school applications and internship at a prestigious consulting firm. Our parents hung on every word, their pride evident in every nod and smile. When they finally turned their attention to me, I shared carefully edited highlights from MIT. I mentioned my research project, but downplayed its significance. I talked about friends, but avoided mentioning the startup idea my roommate and I had been developing. Something in me wasn't ready to give them ammunition to dismiss my achievements again. That's nice, dear, my mother said when I finished. Though I do hope you're not neglecting your appearance. College is an important time for meeting the right sort of people. The familiar sting of her criticism reminded me why I'd left. Nothing had changed in their fundamental inability to see me as I truly was. They were still waiting for me to fail, still convinced that success looked like Marcus's path and nothing else. I cut the visit short, claiming I needed to return for a research project. As I hugged Grandma Elena goodbye, she pressed something into my hand, a small silver pendant she'd worn for as long as I could remember. For luck, Mija, she whispered. Though you won't need it. You make your own luck now. Back at MIT, I threw myself into my studies with renewed intensity. The startup idea I'd mentioned to no one became my secret obsession. Jake Martinez, a brilliant computer engineering major from California, had approached me about developing a new type of mobile security application. His family had been victims of identity theft, and he was passionate about creating better protection for personal data. Your algorithms could revolutionize how we detect suspicious activity, he explained over coffee in Data Center. Instead of reacting to breaches after they happen, we could predict and prevent them. The concept fascinated me. We began working on prototypes in our spare time, meeting in empty classrooms and computer labs, fueled by vision and caffeine. Our professors noticed our collaboration and, after seeing our initial results, encouraged us to enter MIT's entrepreneurship competition. We didn't win first place, but our third-place finish caught the attention of several Boston venture capital firms. Suddenly, we were fielding calls from investors who wanted to fund our idea. The girl who had been told she wasn't suited for the professional world was pitching to men in expensive suits who hung on every word of her technical presentations. This predictive security model could transform the entire cybersecurity industry, one investor told us after our presentation. How quickly can you build a working prototype? My junior year became a blur of classes, research, and startup development. Jake and I officially incorporated SecureGuard solutions, working nights and weekends to build our platform while maintaining our academic commitments. We hired 2 other MIT students as our first employees, operating out of a cramped shared workspace in Cambridge. The breakthrough came during spring semester when we successfully predicted and prevented a major data breach at a local business that had agreed to test our system. The attack would have compromised thousands of customer records, but our algorithm identified the threat pattern 72 hours before traditional security systems would have detected anything unusual. Word spread quickly through Boston's tech community. Our client base expanded from small local businesses to regional corporations. By the end of my junior year, SecureGuard Solutions had 15 employees and $2 million in annual revenue. Madison, Dr. Chen said during our final meeting that semester, you're at a crossroads. You could continue your research path, pursue graduate school, potentially academia, or you could commit fully to this company you're building. Both paths have merit, but you can't do both at the level of excellence you're capable of. The decision wasn't difficult. Academia had given me the foundation I needed, but entrepreneurship felt like my true calling. The thrill of building something from nothing, of seeing my ideas transform into solutions that protected real people from real harm, it was intoxicating in a way that research papers could never be. I made the decision to leave MIT after my junior year, a choice that horrified my academic advisors, but felt absolutely right. Jake and I moved SecureGuard Solutions to a larger office space in Boston's financial district, hired an experienced CFO, and began preparing for our first major round of venture capital funding. The presentation to Meridian Ventures took place on a rainy Thursday in October. I stood before a conference room full of investors, wearing my most professional outfit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained the future of our company. 3 years earlier, my parents had told me I wasn't suited for the professional world. Now I was asking for $10 million based on nothing but my vision and track record. Our predictive security model has achieved a 95% accuracy rate in threat detection, I explained, clicking through slides that showed our growth trajectory. We're not just preventing attacks, we're revolutionizing how cybersecurity works. The questions that followed were sharp, challenging, designed to expose any weakness in our business model. I answered each one with confidence born from months of preparation and years of understanding the technology at a level that few people could match. "Miss Carter," the lead partner said as the presentation concluded, "this is impressive work. We'd like to move forward with due diligence." 2 weeks later, Meridian Ventures offered us $12 million for a 25% stake in SecureGuard Solutions. At 21 years old, I was the CEO of a company valued at nearly $50 million. The girl who had been dismissed as antisocial and unrealistic was now responsible for the livelihoods of 30 employees and the security of hundreds of clients. Success brought new challenges and new opportunities. Tech industry publications began featuring articles about SecureGuard's innovative approach. I was invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences, sharing stages with experts I'd admired from afar. The woman who had once eaten lunch alone in her high school computer lab was now networking with the brightest minds in technology. Personal growth paralleled professional success. The confidence that came from building something valuable began to transform how I carried myself in the world. I invested in a professional wardrobe that made me feel powerful rather than hidden. I learned to navigate social situations with the same strategic thinking I applied to business challenges. During a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco, I met David Nakamura, a brilliant software architect who had developed security protocols for major tech companies. Our conversation about encryption methods over dinner turned into something deeper, built on mutual respect and shared passion for technology. "You think about problems differently than anyone I've ever met," he said as we walked along the waterfront after the conference. "It's like you see patterns that are invisible to everyone else." David became my first real relationship, founded on intellectual compatibility and genuine affection rather than social expectations. With him, I could be fully myself, the ambitious CEO, the technical innovator, the woman still healing from years of family rejection. He understood all of these aspects and valued each one. My personal life was flourishing, but one relationship remained painfully unresolved. I maintained minimal contact with my family, exchanging brief holiday cards and birthday messages, but nothing substantial. Grandma Elena and I spoke regularly, her pride in my success evident in every conversation, but the rest of the Carters remained essentially strangers to the woman I'd become. The temptation to prove them wrong was always present, but I'd learned to channel that energy into building rather than vindication. Let them discover my success in their own time, I reasoned. My worth wasn't dependent on their recognition of it. That philosophy was tested when Marcus called unexpectedly during my 4th year as CEO. SecureGuard Solutions had just completed a major acquisition, expanding our services into artificial intelligence-driven threat detection. Our company was now valued at over $200 million, and I was being featured on the cover of Tech Entrepreneur magazine. "Madison." Marcus's voice sounded strange, uncertain. "I saw the article about your company. Is that really you?" For a moment, I was transported back to childhood, when Marcus's opinion had mattered more than anyone else's. But the successful woman I'd become quickly reasserted herself. "Hello, Marcus," I said calmly. "Yes, that's really me." "Madison, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were doing something with computers, but this is incredible. You're a CEO. You're successful. Really successful." The wonder in his voice was gratifying, but also sad. My own brother had so completely bought into our parents' narrative that my success came as a complete shock. "I've been building this for 5 years," I said. "It didn't happen overnight. But why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you let us know how well you were doing?" The question hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us wanted to address directly. Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. When I left for MIT, when I was building this company, when I needed support the most, would knowing about my success have changed anything? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Madison, about what happened before you left for college, I've always regretted not standing up for you more. I was young and stupid and—" "You were 21, I interrupted. "Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to defend your sister when she needed you." I know, and I'm sorry. Is there any chance we could meet? Talk in person? I'm getting married next month, and I'd like you to be there. I'd like you to meet Sarah, and I'd like our family to see who you really are." The invitation caught me off guard. After years of silence, Marcus wanted me at his wedding. Part of me was curious about the woman who had won my brother's heart, and another part wondered if this might be an opportunity for some kind of closure with my family. When and where? I asked before I could change my mind. December 15th at the Fontainebleau in Miami Beach. "Madison, I know this is awkward after all this time, but I really want you there. You're my sister, and I've missed you." I agreed to attend, though I insisted on bringing David as my +1. If I was going to face my family after 8 years, I wanted moral support from someone who understood my worth. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with second-guessing. Part of me wanted to make a grand entrance, to ensure everyone knew exactly how successful I'd become. But the wiser part of me, the part that had learned to find validation from within, suggested a quieter approach. I chose an elegant navy blue dress that was expensive but understated, paired with the silver pendant Grandma Elena had given me. My appearance had evolved dramatically over the years, not because I'd suddenly become conventionally beautiful, but because confidence had transformed how I carried myself. The awkward girl who had hidden behind oversized clothes was now a poised woman who commanded attention through presence rather than pretense. David looked handsome in his charcoal gray suit, his calm demeanor helping to settle my nerves as our plane descended into Miami International Airport. The city sprawled below us, all glass and water and perpetual sunshine, still beautiful but no longer intimidating. "Ready for this?" he asked, squeezing my hand as we waited for our luggage. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied, meaning it more than I'd expected. The Fontainebleau was a monument to Miami excess, its soaring lobby filled with marble and gold, and enough flowers to stock a small greenhouse. I checked us into our suite, noting with some satisfaction that I could afford the luxury without a second thought. The insecure girl who had once worried about every expense was now comfortable in spaces designed for the wealthy. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday evening, giving me a full day to acclimate to being back in Miami. David and I spent the morning walking along South Beach, the December sun warm on our faces, the ocean stretching endlessly toward a horizon that had once seemed to represent all the places I couldn't go. "Your hometown is beautiful," David observed as we sat at a beachside cafe, sharing Cuban coffee and watching the early tourists claim their spots on the sand. "It is," I agreed. I'd forgotten how much I missed the water. That evening, we arrived at the rehearsal dinner fashionably late, my strategy for minimizing the awkwardness of prolonged encounters. The private dining room overlooked the hotel's infinity pool, twinkling lights reflecting off the water like scattered stars. I spotted Marcus immediately, standing near the bar with a petite blonde woman who could only be his fiancée. He looked good, successful and confident in the way that had always come naturally to him. When he noticed me approaching, his face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Madison," he swept me into a hug that felt surprisingly natural. "You look incredible." "Sarah, this is my sister Madison, the one I've been telling you about." Sarah Chun, yes, Chun, which made me wonder about family reactions to her obviously Asian heritage, turned out to be a corporate lawyer with an intelligence that sparkled in her eyes. We connected immediately over shared experiences of being underestimated in male-dominated fields. Marcus has told me so much about you, she said warmly. Though he clearly undersold your success. I looked up your company after he mentioned it. What you've built is remarkable. It was refreshing to meet someone in my family's circle who understood business achievement on its own terms. Sarah and I talked easily while Marcus introduced David to other guests, and for a moment I wondered if this reunion might go more smoothly than I'd anticipated. Then I saw my parents. Robert and Victoria Carter looked exactly as I remembered, perhaps with slightly more silver in their hair, but otherwise unchanged. They stood near the windows overlooking the pool, deep in conversation with other couples from their social circle. My mother wore an elegant black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. My father's custom suit and confident posture announced his status to anyone paying attention. They hadn't noticed me yet, giving me time to observe them from across the room. For a moment, I was transported back to childhood, watching them at similar events, always perfectly put together, always playing their parts in Miami's social theater. Marcus appeared at my elbow, following my gaze. They don't know you're here yet, he said quietly. I wanted to tell them, but I wasn't sure how you'd want to handle it. Before I could respond, my mother looked in our direction. I watched her expression shift from polite social interest to confusion to recognition to shock. She touched my father's arm, whispering something urgent in his ear. He turned, his eyes finding mine across the crowded room. The moment stretched like a freeze frame, 8 years of silence and separation condensed into a single look. Then my mother began walking toward us, my father following a step behind, their social training overriding their obvious shock. Madison, my mother said when she reached us, her voice carefully controlled. What a surprise. We had no idea you were coming. Hello, Mother. Father. I kept my voice neutral, professional. Marcus invited me. I hope that's all right. Of course, my father said, though his eyes were scanning my appearance, probably trying to reconcile the poised woman before him with the awkward girl he remembered. You look well. Thank you. I'd like you to meet David Nakamura, my partner. I emphasized the word slightly, curious how they'd react to his obviously non-white surname. David stepped forward with perfect grace, extending his hand. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, it's a pleasure to meet you. Marcus speaks of you often. My parents shook his hand politely, but I could see my mother's wheels turning, cataloging details about his appearance, his bearing, trying to place him in their social hierarchy. What do you do, David? My father asked, the question loaded with judgment masked as polite interest. I'm a software architect, David replied easily. I specialize in cybersecurity systems. How interesting, my mother said in the tone she reserved for things that weren't interesting at all. And Madison, what brings you to Miami? Are you visiting from Boston? The question revealed how completely they'd lost track of my life. They didn't know I'd left MIT, didn't know about Secure Guard Solutions, didn't know anything about the woman I'd become. Actually, I live in San Francisco now, I said. I run a cybersecurity company there. How nice, my mother replied automatically, then paused as the implications registered. You run a company?
Yes. Secure Guard Solutions.
We develop predictive security software for corporations. My father's expression sharpened with interest. In his world, running a company meant something, even if he didn't understand what the company did. How large a company? He asked, his business instincts overriding his parental disinterest. About 200 employees across 3 offices, I replied calmly. We serve Fortune 500 clients primarily. The silence that followed was loaded with recalculation. This wasn't the failed daughter they'd expected to encounter. This was success in terms they could understand and respect. Madison started the company while she was still in college, Marcus added proudly. She's been featured in major business magazines. My mother's smile became strained as she processed this information. How wonderful. We'll have to catch up properly later. There are so many people we need to introduce you to. I recognized the deflection, the way she pivoted to social obligations when faced with information that didn't fit her narrative. Some things never changed. The rest of the rehearsal dinner passed in a blur of introductions and conversations that danced around the elephant in the room, my 8-year absence and sudden reappearance as a successful entrepreneur. People who had known me as a child struggled to reconcile their memories with the confident woman I'd become. "Little Madison Carter," said Mrs. Pemberton, a family friend who'd known me since childhood. "I hardly recognized you. You've certainly changed." "People do tend to grow up," I replied with a smile that was more diplomatic than felt. The most telling moment came when I overheard a conversation between my parents and another couple near the bar. "Yes, Madison has done quite well for herself," my mother was saying, her voice carrying the tone she used when discussing mildly interesting news about distant acquaintances. "Computer companies, you know. Very modern." She spoke about my success as if it were a hobby that had gotten slightly out of hand, nothing that reflected any real achievement or intelligence. Even faced with undeniable evidence of my accomplishments, she couldn't bring herself to acknowledge that she'd been wrong about my potential. David noticed my tension as the evening wore on. "You okay?" he asked quietly during a brief moment alone. "Just remembering why I left," I replied honestly. "Want to make an early exit?" I considered it, but something stubborn in me refused to retreat.
No.
"I've spent 8 years building a life I'm proud of. I'm not running away from it now." The wedding ceremony itself was beautiful in the way that expensive events always are: flawless execution, perfect weather, and enough flowers to stock a small greenhouse. Marcus looked handsome and happy as he waited at the altar, and Sarah was radiant as she walked down the aisle in a gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. I sat in the third row with David, close enough to be acknowledged as family, but far enough to avoid being prominently featured in photos. It was a positioning that felt appropriate, somehow neither central nor excluded, just present as myself. During the reception, I found myself in conversation with Sarah's parents, both successful professionals who'd immigrated from Taiwan and built prosperous careers in California. They were warm, intelligent people who clearly adored their daughter and had embraced Marcus wholeheartedly. "Sarah tells us you're an entrepreneur," her mother said with genuine interest. "What kind of business do you have?" I explained secure guard solutions in terms that non-technical people could understand, and found myself enjoying the conversation in a way that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with building my company in the first place. "That's remarkable," Sarah's father said. "Starting a company so young and growing it to that size, it takes real vision and courage." His words carried the kind of respect I'd been craving from my own parents for years. It felt both validating and sad that I had to find familial pride from strangers. The moment I'd been both dreading and anticipating came during the father-daughter dance. As tradition demanded, my father was supposed to dance with both daughters, and Marcus announced that he wanted to include me in the celebration. I found myself on the dance floor with the man who had dismissed my dreams as worthless fantasies, trying to navigate both the steps and the emotional minefield of our relationship. "You've surprised us all, Madison," he said as we moved awkwardly around the floor. "This company of yours, it sounds quite successful." "It is," I replied simply. "I have to admit, we never expected you to." He trailed off, perhaps realizing that finishing the sentence would require acknowledging how wrong they'd been about me. "To succeed?" I finished for him. "I know." He was quiet for a moment, and I could see him struggling with concepts that didn't fit his worldview. In his mind, success looked like Marcus's path: prestigious university, established career track, social connections. My route to achievement was foreign to him, which made it harder to dismiss, but also harder to understand. "I'd like to learn more about what you do," he said finally. "Perhaps we could have lunch while you're in town." It was an olive branch of sorts, awkward and limited, but genuine. The man who had told me I wasn't worth investing in was now curious about the investment I'd made in myself. "Perhaps," I replied, non-committal, but not dismissive. When the dance ended, I excused myself and stepped onto the hotel's terrace overlooking the ocean. The December air was warm and humid, carrying the salt scent that had defined my childhood. David found me there a few minutes later, understanding that I needed space to process the complex emotions of the evening. "How are you feeling?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside me. "Complicated," I answered honestly. "Part of me feels vindicated, you know? I've proven them wrong in every way that matters." "How are you feeling?" he asked, leaning against the railing beside me. Complicated, I answered honestly. Part of me feels vindicated, you know? I've proven them wrong in every way that matters. But another part of me realizes that their validation still isn't coming even now. They see my success, but they don't see me. David nodded thoughtfully. Do you need their validation anymore? It was a question I'd been avoiding, even in therapy. The honest answer was that some wounded part of me still craved their approval, their acknowledgement that they'd been wrong to dismiss me. But the stronger part of me, the part that had built SecureGuard from nothing, knew that their opinion was irrelevant to my worth. I thought I did, I said slowly. But watching them tonight, seeing how they're processing this, I realize they're never going to truly understand what I've accomplished. And that's okay. I don't need them to. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the waves crash against the beach below. The woman who had fled Miami 8 years ago with nothing but determination and a laptop had returned as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. More importantly, she'd returned as someone who no longer needed anyone else's permission to exist. The next morning brought an unexpected knock on our hotel room door. Marcus stood in the hallway, still in his pajamas, looking like he hadn't slept well. Can we talk? He asked. Just the two of us? David discreetly made himself scarce, claiming he wanted to explore the hotel's gym. Marcus and I sat on the suite's balcony, the morning sun warm on our faces, the sounds of Miami waking up filtering up from the street below. Last night was surreal, Marcus began. Seeing you again, seeing who you've become. Madison, I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the half-hearted attempts I made last night. I waited, curious what he would say when forced to confront our history honestly. When you left for MIT, when Mom and Dad said those things about not supporting you, I should have stood up for you. I should have defended you, helped you, something. Instead, I let them erase you from our family like you'd never existed. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious rather than accusatory. Marcus ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I remembered from childhood. Honestly, because it was easier. Standing up to them would have meant risking my own position, my own comfort. I was a coward. His honesty was refreshing, even if it came years too late. After you left, he continued, I used to look you up online sometimes. I found articles about your company, photos of you at conferences. I was proud of you, but I was also ashamed that I'd let you go through everything alone. You could have reached out, I pointed out. I could have. But I was terrified you'd reject me, and I felt like I deserved it. When I decided to get married, I knew I had to try. I couldn't start this new chapter of my life without at least attempting to repair what I'd broken with you. I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine remorse there. The confident man who had always seemed to have everything figured out looked vulnerable in a way I'd never witnessed before. I don't need your apology to move forward with my life, Marcus, I said finally. I've built something meaningful, without any of you. But I appreciate you saying it. Is there any chance for us to have a relationship going forward? I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to try. The question hung between us, weighted with years of hurt and possibility. The mature part of me recognized that people could change, that relationships could be rebuilt on new foundations. But the protective part of me was wary of reopening wounds that had finally healed. Maybe, I said eventually. But it would have to be a completely different relationship than what we had as kids. I'm not looking for a big brother to take care of me, I'm looking for an equal who respects who I've become. I can do that, Marcus said quickly. Madison, seeing you last night, talking to David, learning about your company, I'm not the same person who stood by silently 8 years ago. And you're not the same person who left. Maybe we can figure out who we are to each other now. Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar Miami number, which I normally would have ignored, but something made me answer. Madison? It's your Aunt Carmen. My father's sister, whom I hadn't spoken to since leaving for college. Carmen had always been the black sheep of the Carter family, choosing social work over society events, substance over style. Aunt Carmen? How did you get this number? Your grandmother Elena gave it to me before she passed. Madison, I know this is sudden, but I need to see you. There are things about your family that you need to know. A chill ran through me. What kind of things? Not over the phone. Can you meet me for lunch today? It's important. I agreed, driven by curiosity and a growing sense that this weekend was going to reveal more than I'd bargained for. Marcus looked concerned as I hung up. Everything okay? I'm not sure, I replied honestly. Carmen wants to meet with me. She says there are things about her family I need to know. Carmen always did see things differently than the rest of us, Marcus mused. Want me to come with you? No, I think this is something I need to handle alone. I met Carmen at a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, far from the polished establishments our family usually frequented. She looked older than I remembered, her dark hair streaked with silver, but her eyes still held the intelligence that had always set her apart from the rest of the Carters. Mija, she said, embracing me warmly. Look at you. Elena would be so proud. You spoke to Grandma Elena recently? I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Until the very end. She never stopped talking about you, never stopped believing you'd prove them all wrong. Carmen's expression turned serious. Madison, there are things about your father's business, about your family's money, that you need to understand. What she told me over the next hour changed everything I thought I knew about the Carter family legacy. My father's real estate empire, it turned out, wasn't built entirely on legitimate business practices. For years, he'd been involved in money laundering operations, using his developments to clean dirty money for various criminal organizations. Elena figured it out years ago, Carmen explained. She tried to convince Robert to get out, but he was in too deep. The lifestyle, the social standing, all of it was built on blood money. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process this information. Why are you telling me this now? Because your success is clean, Madison. What you've built, you built honestly. You need to know that you're not like them, that you never were. Your instincts to reject their values, to build something on your own, those instincts were right. The conversation explained so much about my family's dynamic, their obsession with appearances, their dismissal of anything that threatened their carefully constructed facade. My interest in technology, my awkward honesty, my inability to play their social games, all of it had made me a threat to their secrets. Does Marcus know? I asked. I don't think so. He's always been carefully shielded from the darker aspects of Robert's business. But Sarah's smart, and she's asking questions that make your parents nervous. I thought about Sarah's sharp intelligence, her legal background, her obvious integrity. If my father was involved in criminal activities, having a lawyer for a daughter-in-law could be problematic. Carmen, why didn't you ever speak up? Why didn't you try to stop him? Her expression grew pained. Who would have believed me? Robert had all the power, all the connections. I was just the family disappointment, the one who chose social work over social climbing. But I documented everything I could, kept records of what I suspected. She slid a thick envelope across the table. This is for you. Elena wanted you to have it, insurance, she called it. Proof of what Robert really is, in case you ever need it. I stared at the envelope, understanding that accepting it would fundamentally change my relationship with my family. Knowledge was power, but it was also burden. I don't want this, I said finally. I don't want to be responsible for exposing him or protecting him. I just want to live my own life. Then keep it safe, Carmen suggested. You don't have to do anything with it. But if the day comes when you need to protect yourself or someone you care about, you'll have options. I took the envelope, feeling its weight both physical and metaphorical. Another secret, another complication in an already complex family dynamic. That evening, I found myself back on the hotel terrace with David, the envelope hidden in our room safe, its contents weighing on my conscience. You're quiet tonight, David observed. Rough day. I told him about my conversation with Carmen, about the envelope and its implications. David listened without judgment, his calm presence anchoring me as I processed this new reality. What are you going to do? He asked when I finished. Nothing for now. Carmen was right, I need to focus on my own life, my own integrity. I can't control what my father has done, but I can control how I respond to it. And Marcus? Are you going to tell him? It was a question I'd been wrestling with all afternoon. Marcus had married into his own life, his own future. Did I have the right to burden him with this knowledge? Or did I have the obligation to warn him? I don't know, I admitted. Maybe someday, if it becomes relevant.
But not now.
He deserves a chance to be happy without this hanging over him. The decision felt right, or at least as right as any decision could feel in such a morally complex situation. I was choosing to focus on what I could control, my own actions, my own integrity, my own future. 2 days later, David and I flew back to San Francisco, leaving Miami and its complicated family dynamics behind. But something had shifted during those few days. I no longer felt like I was running from my past, I was choosing my future. The months that followed brought continued success for SecureGuard Solutions. We expanded into international markets, developed new AI-driven security protocols, and acquired 2 smaller companies that complemented our core services. I was featured on more magazine covers, invited to speak at major conferences, and courted by investors who wanted to fund our next phase of growth. But the most significant development was personal. Marcus and I began exchanging emails, then phone calls, slowly rebuilding a relationship based on who we were now rather than who we'd been as children. He and Sarah visited San Francisco, and I was struck by how happy he seemed, how grounded his marriage was in mutual respect and genuine affection. Sarah and I connected on a level I'd never expected. She was brilliant, funny, and unimpressed by the Carter family's social pretensions. During their visit, she confided that she'd noticed some inconsistencies in my father's business dealings but hadn't pursued them out of respect for Marcus. "I'm a lawyer," she said as we walked through Golden Gate Park. "I notice patterns, discrepancies. Some of the companies your father does business with, they don't quite add up." I listened without revealing what I knew, but her observations confirmed that the truth about my father's activities was becoming harder to hide. Change was coming whether I participated in it or not. 6 months after the wedding, my mother called. It was the first time we'd spoken since Miami, and her voice carried an unfamiliar uncertainty. "Madison, I was wondering if you might be free for lunch when you're next in Miami. I'd like to speak with you privately." The conversation that followed was stilted but significant. My mother, it seemed, was beginning to grapple with her own conscience about how she'd treated me. She didn't apologize exactly, but she acknowledged that perhaps she'd been too quick to dismiss my potential. "You've built something remarkable," she said over expensive salads at her favorite restaurant. "I may not understand the technology, but I understand success. You've proven that there are many paths to achievement." It was progress, albeit limited. She still couldn't bring herself to admit that she'd been wrong, but she was at least acknowledging that I'd been right about my own capabilities. My father remained distant, communicating primarily through Marcus when communication was necessary at all. I suspected he was uncomfortable with my success partly because it challenged his worldview, but also because my independence made me less controllable. In a family built on secrets and carefully managed appearances, my honest achievement was both inspiring and threatening. A year after Marcus's wedding, I made a decision that surprised even me. I established a scholarship fund at MIT for students from low-income families pursuing computer science degrees. The Madison Carter Foundation would provide not just financial support but mentorship and career guidance, helping talented students navigate the transition from academia to entrepreneurship. The announcement generated significant media attention, including a feature story in the MIT Alumni magazine that was picked up by several national publications. The article included details about my journey from rejected family member to successful CEO, though I was careful to keep the focus on the positive message rather than family drama. My parents learned about the foundation through the newspaper, which seemed fitting somehow. My mother called to congratulate me, her voice carrying genuine pride for the first time I could remember. "This is wonderful, Madison. What a meaningful way to give back." "Thank you," I replied. "It feels good to help other students who might face similar challenges." There was a pause before she spoke again. "Madison, I know we've never discussed what happened before you left for college. I want you to know that your father and I were proud of what you've accomplished. We may not have always shown it in the right way, but we're proud." It wasn't the apology I'd once craved, but it was acknowledgement. After years of silence, she was finally willing to admit that they'd misjudged me. It felt like closure, or at least the beginning of it. 2 years after that phone call, I received another unexpected invitation. My parents were hosting a charity gala for the Miami Children's Hospital, and they wanted me to be the keynote speaker. The request came through Marcus, who seemed as surprised as I was. They specifically asked for you, he explained during our weekly phone call. Dad said he wanted someone who represented innovation and success. Mom said she wanted someone who could inspire young people to pursue their dreams despite obstacles. The irony wasn't lost on me. The family that had once dismissed my dreams now wanted me to inspire others to pursue theirs. But I recognized the gesture for what it was, an attempt at reconciliation, awkward and imperfect but genuine. I accepted the invitation, curious to see how this full-circle moment would feel. The gala was held at the same country club where Marcus had gotten married, in the same ballroom where I'd once felt so out of place. But this time, I was the guest of honor, the featured speaker whose story was being celebrated rather than hidden. My parents introduced me with obvious pride, their words carefully crafted to highlight my achievements without dwelling on our complicated history. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience filled with Miami's elite, including many people who had dismissed me as a child, I felt a profound sense of completion. Success, I told the gathering, isn't about meeting other people's expectations. It's about exceeding your own. It's about building something meaningful, whether that's a company, a family, a community, or simply a life that reflects your values. I spoke about the importance of supporting young people who didn't fit conventional molds, about recognizing potential in unexpected forms, about the danger of limiting anyone's dreams based on superficial judgments. I didn't mention my own childhood experiences directly, but anyone who knew our family history could read between the lines. The response was overwhelmingly positive. People approached me afterward to share their own stories of overcoming obstacles, of finding success in unexpected ways, of learning to believe in themselves when others didn't. It felt like the purpose I'd been searching for, using my platform to help others find their own paths to achievement. That night, my parents and I had dinner together for the first time in over a decade. The conversation was still awkward in places, still marked by years of distance and misunderstanding, but it was honest in a way it had never been before. "Madison," my father said as dessert was served, "I owe you an apology. We made mistakes when you were younger. We didn't understand your potential, and we didn't support you the way parents should." It was the closest he'd ever come to admitting fault, and I could see the effort it cost him. My mother nodded in agreement, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means more than you know." "Can you forgive us?" my mother asked quietly. I considered the question seriously. Could I forgive them for the years of dismissal, the crushing rejection when I needed them most, the erasure of my existence from their perfect family narrative? Could I let go of the hurt that had driven me to prove them wrong, that had fueled my determination to succeed despite them rather than because of them? "I can forgive you," I said finally, "but I can't forget what happened. Those experiences shaped who I became, for better and worse. I need you to understand that." "We do," my father said. "And we're grateful that you became the woman you are despite our failures." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. We would never have the easy, unconditional relationship I'd once craved. Too much had happened, too many years had passed, too many words couldn't be unsaid. But it was honest, and honesty was a foundation we could build on. 3 years later, I sold SecureGuard Solutions to a major tech conglomerate for $500 million, retaining a significant stake in the company and a position on the board of directors. The sale gave me the freedom to pursue new ventures while ensuring that the company I'd built would continue to thrive. I used part of the proceeds to expand the Madison Carter Foundation, establishing coding boot camps in underserved communities and funding research into cybersecurity applications for social good. I also started a venture capital fund focused on supporting female entrepreneurs in technology, providing not just capital but mentorship and strategic guidance. David and I got married in a small ceremony in Napa Valley, surrounded by the chosen family of friends and colleagues who had supported us throughout our journey. Marcus served as my man of honor, a role that felt perfectly right given how our relationship had evolved. My parents attended, their presence no longer fraught with tension, but simply part of the tapestry of my life. During my wedding speech, I thought about the girl who had fled Miami with nothing but determination and a laptop. She had dreamed of proving her worth, of forcing her family to recognize her value, of achieving success despite their rejection. What she hadn't understood then was that the greatest victory wouldn't be their acknowledgement, it would be her own recognition of her inherent worth. Success, I told our wedding guests, isn't about proving other people wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about believing in your own potential even when nobody else does, and then having the courage to pursue it. As I looked out at the faces gathered to celebrate David and me, I saw the life I'd built not in reaction to my family's rejection, but in response to my own vision of what was possible. I saw friends who valued my ideas, colleagues who respected my leadership, men who were inspired by my example. I saw a future limited only by my own imagination and determination. The journey from rejected daughter to successful entrepreneur had taught me that validation from others is never the goal. The goal is building a life that reflects your values, creating something meaningful that outlasts your own existence, and helping others find their own paths to fulfillment. Standing there in my wedding dress, surrounded by love and possibility, I realized that the frightened girl who had left Miami 8 years earlier had found something more valuable than her family's approval. She had found herself. Today, when young entrepreneurs ask me for advice about overcoming rejection or dealing with family members who don't support their dreams, I tell them what I wish someone had told me. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. Build your own vision, trust your own instincts, and remember that the most important validation is the one you give yourself. The family that once dismissed me as their greatest disappointment now introduces me as their greatest success. But I know the truth. I was always valuable, always worthy, always capable of greatness. I just needed the courage to believe it myself, and the determination to prove it to the one person whose opinion truly mattered mine. Sometimes the greatest gift rejection can give you is the freedom to become who you were always meant to be. In my case, it led me to build not just a successful company, but a meaningful life filled with purpose, love, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had never compromised my authentic self for anyone else's approval. The girl who had once desperately sought her family's validation had grown into a woman who understood that the most powerful approval comes from within. And that understanding, more than any business success or public recognition, was the true measure of how far I'd come. 8 years after leaving home with nothing but hope and determination, I had returned as exactly who I'd always been beneath their dismissal, someone worthy of love, respect, and success. The only difference was that now I believed it too.